The sounds of sirens. Hey friends, welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 12, Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Ayruvin, our favorite Masechta for now. Let's move on. Today's Daf is cool. I don't think it's too complicated. What do we talk about? We talk about a Hatzer that's completely open into Makum. So we've talked about this, we've talked about this in the past with our favorite example of like the big Hatzer and the small Hatzer, and that kind of stuff. So when you have like a Rishus HaYachid that's completely open into a place that's also to it, like a Rishus HaRabim, or even like another Hatzer. So what can you do to enable carrying in that Hatzer? We've touched on it a little bit in the past. What is the purpose of a lechi and korah? That's kind of a brief little sugya over there. And the measurements of a Hatzer versus a mavui. Let us begin. We start on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, all the way at the bottom. Well, pretty much. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Lechian. So Rabbi Eliezer says that you need 2 lechis in a mavui, right? So Beis Shammai's opinion was that to be machshir a mavui, you need a lechi and a korah. So, and Beis Hillel said you need a lechi or a korah. Rabbi Eliezer said you need 2 lechis. So now, Ibayu the Gemara asks a kasha. They want to know. Rabbi Eliezer lechian v'korah ka'amar, or duma lechian below korah ka'amar. When Rabbi Eliezer says that you need 2 lechis, is that in addition to a korah, or is that 2 lechis and that's it? You don't need a korah at all. Tashma ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer shalach etzel Rabbi Yosef ben Preda tamido le'ovlin. So there's a story with Rabbi Eliezer that he went to his student Rabbi Yosef ben Preda, and he visited him in Ovlin. That's the name of a place. And he found that his student Rabbi Yosef ben Preda was sitting in a mavui that had only 1 lechi. Whoa. So Rabbi Eliezer says, no, make another lechi. So Rabbi Yosef ben Preda said, what? Like, why? You want me to close up this mavui? Rabbi Eliezer says, no, yeah, close it up. What's the big deal? Okay. The Brisa continues that said Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, so it says Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel do not argue when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide. Now, our Mishnah had quote, right, a certain student quoted Rabbi Shmuel's opinion before Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel's opinion was that when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide, so Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that all you need is a lechi or a mavui. Listen to what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide, she'enu tzarich klum, doesn't need anything, garnished. Where do they argue? They argue between 4 amas and 10 amas. That Beis Shammai says you need a lechi and a korah, Beis Hillel says a lechi or a korah. Okay? Now getting back to the reisha of this brisa, when the story of Rabbi Eliezer visiting Rabbi Yosef ben Preda. So Rabbi Eliezer said, why don't you put up another lechi? Rabbi Yosef ben Preda said what? What do you completely want me to close this off? So now Yomar b'shlama lechin v'korah mishum hachi amar v'chilisos mani tzarich. So it makes sense if you say that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that you need 2 lechis and the korah. That's why Rabbi Yosef ben Preda was saying why should I put another lechi? Do you want me to completely close it? Ella Yomar lechin below korah ma'ilus osmo. But if it's talking about where he had, Rabbi Eliezer was asking him to put up a second lechi, but there was no korah there, well then, why would Rabbi Yosef ben Preda respond by saying, what, do you want me to close it? I mean, it's not exactly closed, the top is open. So, so you can argue that, no, really, Rabbi Eliezer is not talking about 2 lechis and a korah. It really just means, 2 lechis without a korah. So then why would Rabbi Yosef ben Preda respond and say, what, by putting up the second lechi, I'm basically closing this thing. So it's I'm closing it with lechis, but there was no korah. Seder, it's inconclusive about if Rabbi Eliezer requires 2 lechis in addition to a korah or without a korah. It's inconclusive from the story. Now, continues the Gemara, Amar Mar, we said, Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo nechliku be'sham v'besil al mavui shepachas me'arba amas she'enu tzarich klum. So Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said that when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that you don't need anything. But our Mishnah said that when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide, so Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that all you need is a lechi or a korah, but not velo klum, not nothing. You need a lechi or a korah. Sakam Shimon Gamliel is saying that they agree that you don't need anything when it's less than 4 amas. So Amar Rav Ashi Achi Ka'amar. Rav Ashi said this is what Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying. Eino tzarich lechi v'korah k'Beis Shammai v'lo lechi and k'Rabbi Eliezer elo o lechi o korah k'Beis Hillel. That when Rav Shimon Gamliel says that when a mavui is less than 4 amas wide, you don't need anything. It doesn't mean that you mamish don't need anything at all. It means that you don't need the lechi plus korah like Beis Shammai. You don't need 2 lechis like Rabbi Eliezer. Rather, when it's less than 4 amas wide, you only need either a lechi or a korah like Beis Hillel. Everyone agrees on that. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we could say, is even consistent with Rabbi Shmuel in our Mishnah. V'chama. Now, what is the minimum width of a mavui that would require a lechi or a korah? Amar Rav Achlai v'tem Rabbi Yechiel ad arba, until 4 tfachim. If the mavui is less than 4 tfachim wide, that's really narrow. If the mavui is less than 4 tfachim wide, so then, it's pashit, a makum p'tur. So, you wouldn't need a lechi or a korah. But once it's 4 tfachim wide, you need a lechi or a korah. And then 4 amas to 10 amas, it's machlekes. Okay, so now we get into the discussion about how are you matir a Hatzer shenifritz of mlo l'makom ha'aser, right? So if you have a rishus hayachid, you have a Hatzer, it's got 3 walls, but the 4th wall is completely open, let's say to rishus harabim, or as we learned, it can even be completely open to a bigger Hatzer, whatever it is. But let's just say rishus harabim. So you have a Hatzer, and it's completely open to rishus harabim, but you want to be able to carry in the Hatzer. So what do you do? So obviously, we know that by a mavui, you use a lechi or korah. What do you do by a Hatzer if you want to carry in the Hatzer that's completely open to rishus harabim? Amar Rav Sheishes, says Rav Sheishes, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav, Modim Chacham Rabbi Eliezer b'pasei Hatzer. So it says Rav Sheishes, named Rabbi Yirmiyah Rav in the name of Rav, that the Chachamim admit to Rabbi Eliezer that when it comes to a Hatzer, you need 2. Rabbi Eliezer said by a mavui you need 2 lechis, so by a Hatzer, pas and a Hatzer is the same thing as lechi and a mavui. So the Chacham admit to Rabbi Eliezer that when it comes to a Hatzer you need 2 pasin, 1 on either side of the breach. Rav Nachman Omar, and Rav Nachman said, halacha Rabbi Eliezer b'pasei Hatzer, that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to the pasei Hatzer, that you need 2 of them in this Hatzer. So basically, Rav Sheishes and Rav Nachman agree that the outcome is that you need 2 pasin by this Hatzer. They disagree slightly in a technicality, which is that according to Rav Sheishes, he says that the Chacham admit to Rabbi Eliezer, i.e. they agree with Rabbi Eliezer that by a Hatzer shenifritz of mlo l'makom ha'aser that you would need 2 pasin. Whereas according to Rav Nachman, the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, that you need 2 pasin, but the Chacham don't necessarily agree with Rabbi Eliezer. Just we pasin like Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak man modim Rabbi. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, who is this that agrees with Rabbi Eliezer that by a Hatzer you need 2 pasin? As we learned the other day, that is Rabbi's opinion. Halacha mechlal de pligi man poligale. So then the Gemara says that according to Rav Nachman, he says that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, that you need 2 pasin by this Hatzer, but that implies that nonetheless there are those who argue with Rabbi Eliezer, but we just pasin like Rabbi Eliezer nonetheless. Who are those that argue? Rabbanon. It's the rabbis. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Hatzer niteres b'pas echad Rabbi Yomer b'shnei pasin, that a Hatzer that this Hatzer, Shnifritz Lo L'Makom Ha'asur, all you need is one pas, whereas Rebbe says you need two pasin. Okay, very nice. Amr Rabbi Asi, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hatzer tzricha shnei pasin, that this Hatzer needs two pasin. Okay, add him to the group. Amr le Reb Zeira Rabbi Asi, but now Reb Zeira says to Rabbi Asi, Amr Rabbi Yochanan achi, did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? V'ha at hu to Amr mishmei to Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Zeira then says, but you yourself, Rabbi Asi, you said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, pasei Hatzer, that when it comes to the pasin in a Hatzer, tzrichin she'eboin dalid, that they need to be 4 tfachim wide. Okay? If you say, yeah, exactly, that you need to have 4 tfachim on either side, meaning as so Rabbi Asi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that a Hatzer would need 2 of these pasim, and then Rabbi Asi also said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that these pasim would have to be 4 tfachim wide. Okay, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is this: V'atani Rav Ada bar Avimi kamed Reb Chanina v'amila kamed Reb Chanina bar Papi. But friends, remember what Rav Ada bar Avimi said? Of course you remember. How could you forget? That the bigger Hatzer is 11 amas wide, and the 10 Hatzer is 10 amas wide, which means that there is a difference of 1 amma between them, which means if you spread them out evenly, we're talking about 2 pasin, each one being 3 tfachim. So, Rabbi Asi, if you're saying that Rabbi Yochanan says that you need 2 pasin, and each one has to be 4 tfachim, well then, how could Rav Ada bar Avimi make sense anymore? Because when you divide that extra amma in half, you can only have a maximum of 3 tfachim. So, Kisalik Reb Zeira miyame, when Reb Zeira got out of the water, I guess got back from his trip or something, Perishah explained that Bruach Achas Barba Mishteruchus Mashu L'chan Mashu L'chan. Listen up, friends, you hear that? So, Reb Zeira explained that what Reb Yochanan's opinion is that if you only want to have 1 pas, then it has to be 4 tfachim wide. 2 pasin, they could be any amount. Okay, so if you have a Hatzer Shnifritz Lo L'Makom Ha'asur, so you have a choice. Either 2 pasin of any size, or 1 pas, but it has to be 4 tfachim wide. V'adatani, Rav Ada bar Avimi, Rebbe Hivasavilak Rav Yossi. Now, as we said the other day, that the neatest way to understand Rav Ada bar Avimi is to say that Mishnah of the 2 Hatzers is taught by Rebbe, and that Rebbe holds like Rav Yossi that all you need is a maximum of, right, that you need 3 tfachim for these pasin, and Rebbe also holds like Rebbe Eliezer that you need 2 of these pasin. So that is how it makes sense for Rav Ada bar Avimi, because you take that extra amma, you divide it in half, and you have 3 tfachim on either side. Those are the 2 pasin. Amr Rav Yosef, Amr Rav Yehuda, Amr Shmuel. Okay, says Rav Yosef in the name of his Rebbe. Rav Yehuda says in the name of his Rebbe Shmuel, Hatzer niteres b'fas echad. A Hatzer shnifritz lo l'makom ha'asur. All you need is 1 pas. Amr le'abai Rav Yosef. Now Abai says to his Rebbe Rav Yosef, Mi Amr Shmuel achi. Did Shmuel really say this? Did Shmuel really say this, that all you need is 1 pas? Ve'ha Amr le'Shmuel Rav Chananya bar Shila. But Shmuel said to Rav Chananya bar Shila, Atlu sayvid uvda ela obirov dofen obishne pasin. That Shmuel said to Rav Chananya bar Shila that you need either the majority of the wall, okay, we'll have to understand what that is, or 2 pasin. But he certainly did not say that all you need is 1 pas. So on the one hand, we have Rav Yosef saying in the name of Shmuel that all you need is 1 pas. On the other hand, Shmuel apparently said to Rav Chananya bar Shila that you need either 2 pasin or a rov dofen. So what is it? So Amar Leis, Rav Yosef said to Abai, Anu lo yadayna, he says, I don't know. But I can tell you this. Uvda hava, bidara deraiva. So there was a story that happened with in the town of the shepherds. L'shon hayama nichnas l'chatzer hava. What happened was there was a chatzer that was right on the sea. And the sea went and Mamas breached the wall that was right next to it. I.e., so now you had a chatzer, and it's nifritz law into the sea, which is a carmelis. So you have a chatzer now that lost its wall completely, and it was completely now open to a carmelis. So the Rav Yehuda, and they came to Rav Yehuda, and they asked him, what do we do? And Rav Yehuda said, all you need to do is just put up 1 pas. So Rav Yosef says, look, I mean, I know about that story where we see that Rabbi Yehuda required only one pas. Rabbi Yehuda, after all, was also a student of Shmuel. So maybe you could see from there that Shmuel says that all you need is one pas. So Amarle. So Rabbi responded, Lashon Yam ka Amar Tkala Shekelu Chacham b'mayim. He says, don't bring up proof from that story. That story was talking about water. The Chacham are more maker when it comes to water. Rabbi Tavla Merav, as Rabbi Tavla asked from Rav, Mechitza Tluya Ma'u Shetatir B'churva. If you have like some kind of building that was knocked down, or it doesn't, as Rashi points out, it doesn't have to be a building that was knocked down, just that it's more common to have this such situation in a building that was destroyed, which is that you have a wall that there is some space between the ground and the wall. Okay? So, it's like good achis. So, Amalei mechitza tzluya materis el b'mayim. He says, look, mechitza tzluya only works in water. Kalu shekelu chacham b'mayim. It's a leniency that they had by water. We had this Gemara in Shabbos like this, that if you want to like take water out of the sea, so you can make like a mechitza of 4, then it becomes like a rishus hayachid, and it extends down to the water because of good achis. Then you could take water kilo out of this rishus hayachid. Okay. So we see that it's a kasha, because on the one hand Shmuel was saying that all you need is, you have Rav Yosef quoting, Rav Yehuda is quoting Shmuel as saying that all you need is one pas in the Chatzer Shenifitzam Lo L'makom Ha'aser. On the other hand, we have Shmuel says to, who does he say? 2 friends, remind me? Shmuel Bar Chananya that you need either a rov dofen or 2 pasin. So what's the pshat with Shmuel? Could also have puppet. Rav Huna B'Rav Yoshua, Mibei Rav. So when Rav Papa and Rav Huna B'Rav Yoshua came back from the Bismedrash of Rav, and as the article points out, the Mistama, they weren't coming back mamash from the Bismedrash of Rav because they lived much later than Rav. But he suggests maybe they were coming back from Rav's yeshiva, which was the yeshiva of Surah, even if he was no longer alive. Pershua, so they explained Mirach Achas, Be'arba'a, Mishtei Ruches, Mashvil Chan, Mashvil Chan. So just like we said for Rabbi Yochanan, that if you want to have one pas, well then that pas needs to be 4 tfachim wide. And if you want to have 2 pasin, so then they can be any amount. Rav Papi Kashli HaKashli. Now Rav Papa says, look, if I have a question about this whole story, meaning this whole situation with Shmuel, well then this is my question. Shmuel of Chanani Bashila, Adlo Saivir Uvde El Obirov Dofen Obishne Pasin. So Rav Papa says, look, I don't understand. Shmuel said to Rav Chananya Bashila, he said, look, when it comes to a Chatzer Shenifitzam Lo L'makom Ha'aser, so either have 1 pas that's a rov dofen, that's the majority of the wall, or have 2 pasin that are any amount. Lamli rov dofen, mepasai ba asagi. Why was Shmuel talking about the majority of the wall? Why not just have 1 pas that's 4 tfachim wide? V'chitem amai b'rov dofen, b'dofen shiva. Dibarid ba havale rov dofen. And if you're going to say that, no, but Shmuel was talking about where the width of the Hatzer was 7 tfachim wide, and therefore, if you have rov dofen, so what's the majority of 7? 4. So that was basically his way of saying, have a pas of 4 tfachim. But why should Shmuel require him in that case to have a pas of 4 tfachim? Really, Maker Adin, Papa wants to argue, you should only have to have 3 and a little bit, because once you have 3 and a little bit, well then that what remains in the Hatzer is less than 4 tfachim. And the Amar of Achlai v'Yitem of Yechiel Araba, that Rav Achlai and some say Rabbi Yechiel say that once already the mavui is less than 4 tfachim wide, you don't need a lechi or a korah anymore. So really, once you have this pas that's 3 and a little bit, well, what's remaining is less than 4, in which case then at that point you don't need any more. So one way to understand, to explain is that Rav Achlai and some say Rabbi Yechiel was talking about a mavui. This is talking about a Hatzer Shenifitzam Lo L'makom Ha'aser. It's different. So over here we don't say that once there's less than 4 left, that's enough. Okay, everybody say more if you want. I'll say Rav Achlai Gufei Tanahi. Even Rav Achlai's argument about once it's less than 4 that you don't need a lechi and korah, maybe that's also not so pashit. It's in the Maaseh Machlekes Tanaim. Friends, let's go weiter. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Lashon Yam Anichnas L'Chatzer. So if you have this sea that kind of goes into the Hatzer, now what's different about this time, in the previous time Imam has breached the entire Hatzer. Over here it just makes a breach in the wall, but it's not nifras b'mloa l'makom ha'asr. There's just a breach in the wall. Okay, so we say ein memalin emenu b'Shabbos. You cannot fill up water from the sea on Shabbos. Okay, elim ken yeshlo mechitza gavoa yud tfachim, unless you have a mechitza that is 10 tfachim tall. Okay, but when do we say this? Now that's only if the breach that it made in the wall is more than 10 tfachim, 10 amas wide. Right? If the breach is more than 10 amas wide, well then you're going to have to basically build wall over there until it's 10 amas or less. Aval eser ein tzarich klum. But if it is 10 amas or less, then you don't need anything. Okay. Now, the Gemara asks, says, look, we say that if the breach is 10 amas wide, so then you're not allowed to fill up any water from the sea. But we want to say that this implies, yeah, you can't fill up water from the sea, but you could still carry in the Hatzer. But the Hatzer is open to a place that is forbidden to it. Now, you might be thinking, I thought we're not talking about where it's nifetz hamlo. I thought we're talking about where it's just a little breach, right? And it's 10 amas wide, but it's not the entire thing. So Rashi points out, the bottom Rashi on the page, lav davke ela koyosim eser karle miloa. Anything that's more than 10, it's calling miloa. So the Gemara wants to say is that, why are you allowed to carry in this Hatzer if there's a breach that is more than 10 amas wide that is going into Rosh Hashanah? So why, or a carmelist in this case, so how come you can carry in the Hatzer? This like gidude. So here it's talking about where there's gidude. There's some wall. Really the wall is like kind of intact, just under the sea level, right? And therefore under the water. So therefore, so in terms of being able to carry in that Hatzer, you can carry because there's still that wall there. But because it's still below the top of the water, so therefore you cannot draw water unless you kind of close up the gap. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, mavui shelo nishtatfu bo. So let's say you have a mavui. Okay. So you have a mavui. So you have chatzeris, they open up into the mavui, and we're saying shelo nishtatfu bo. They didn't do a shitufei mivos. Okay. Hechshiru belechi. Now, let's say there's a lechi on this mavui that they didn't do a shitufei mivos. Hazarek l'socho chayiv. If you throw something into this mavui, you're going to be chayiv. Okay. Now, if you had put a korah there instead of a lechi, well then if you throw into this mavui, you're going to be pater. Interesting. Maskeflar of Sheshes. If Sheshes says, I don't understand. We're saying that the reason why you're going to be pater when you throw something from Rosh Hashanah into this mavui that has a korah, we're saying we're pater because they didn't do shitufei mivos. But if they did do a shitufei mivos, then all of a sudden somebody would be chayav for throwing something into this mavui when it's machshir with a korah. I don't understand. Does this loaf of bread make this mavui into Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah? Kilu Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah is defined by the existence or non-existence of walls. It has nothing to do with whether or not you took a loaf of bread and put it in somebody's house. And therefore, if Shesha says, I don't understand, why does whether or not they did a shitufei mivos play any role in whether this mavui is considered Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah? So, V'atanya, Chatzeres Sharabim, Umivos, Sheina Mefulashim. If you have a Hatzer that belongs to many people, or if you have a mavui sasum, bein eruv, bein lo eruv, whether or not you did you made an eruv, kilu an eruv or shitufei mivos, hazarek l'sochan chayiv. If you throw something into these places, you're going to be chayiv. Making an eruv has no implication, no bearing on whether a space is considered a Rosh Hashanah or not. Ella yitmar achiyitmar. Rather, this is what Rav Yehuda is saying. Amar Rav Yehuda mavui she'eno ra'ui l'shituf. A mavui that you're unable to make a shitufei mivos with because it's a mavui amefulash. Hechshiru belechi. If you took a lechi and you put it at one end, hazar l'socho chayev. Now all of a sudden, if you throw something into that mavui, you're going to be chayev for throwing from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. Hechshiru b'korah hazar l'socho pater. But if you didn't put up a lechi in this mavui, I'm a foolish, rather a korah, then if somebody throws into this mavui from Rishus Harabim, you'd be potter. So what do we see? The Rav Yehuda's opinion is that a lechi actually makes a mechitza. When you take a lechi and you put it up by one of the open entrances, and you put it, you stand it up over there, it actually makes a wall. And now it's clear there's 3 walls, and that's why when somebody throws into there, he's chayav. But a korah, it's only mishum heker. It doesn't actually make a wall. It's just that people notice it, but there's still only 2 walls in this mavui. Rabbi said the same thing. Lechi creates a wall, a korah is just a heker. V'Rava Amar, whereas Rava argues and he says, no, both the lechi and the korah are just a heker, they don't make a wall. Eisver of Yaakov bar Abba le Rava. Rabbi Yaakov bar Abba now asks a kasha on Rava. Hazorik le mavui, somebody who throws something into a mavui, okay. Yesh lo lechi chayiv, eno lechi potter. If this mavui has a lechi, then this fellow is going to be chayiv for throwing into this mavui. If the mavui doesn't have a lechi, then he's going to be potter. So doesn't it sound like this lechi is actually serving as a wall? So Achi Kama, Rav is going to say that this is what that brisa means. Eino tzarich ela lechi. If we're talking about a mavui that only needs a lechi in order to be machshir, i.e. a mavui sasum, well then azar l'socho chayiv. If somebody throws epis into the mavui, he's going to be chayiv. Lechi v'davar acher. However, if we require lechi in something else, like a tzuras ha-pesach, well then azar l'socho potter, i.e. if it's a mavui mafulash, so then somebody throws into dartin, is going to be potter. Okay. So we see that a lechi doesn't actually make a wall or not, or at least it can be argued that that brisa does not prove that. Eisvei. So we have another. So Rabbi Yaakov bar Abba asks another kasha to Rava. Yasser al Kain Amr Rabbi Yehuda. This is already a brisa, or maybe even a mishnah that we've seen several times already. Somebody who's 2 houses, one on either side of Rishus Harabim, so you just put a lechi, on both sides of one of the houses, by the entrance where you would enter into this area and exit this area, and then you can carry in the middle according to Rabbi Yehuda. To which the Chacham said, no, you can't do that. You can't just make an Ayruvin Rishus Harabim like this. But what do we see? That you had this area that was Rishus Harabim, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying, you just put up lechis, and now it's all of a sudden Rishus HaYachid, i.e. these lechis are serving as walls. And the Rabbanan aren't necessarily arguing and saying that the lechis don't serve as walls, they're just saying that you can't make an Eruv like this in Rishus Harabim, but apparently it seems like a lechi is actually a wall. What does Rava do with that? So again, Asam Kosavar, Rabbi Yehuda, Shtei Mechitzas D'Oraisa. Rava responds that no, Rabbi Yehuda holds that 2 Mechitzas is all you need to make a Rishus HaYachid Mid'Oraisa. But I guess if it was, the Chacham would argue and say, if it's a Rishus Harabim, if lots of people are passing through, whatever, you can't just, 2 walls don't count as a Rishus HaYachid, and you wouldn't be able to just put up the lechis to say that now you can carry in there. Fine. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, mavui she'orko karachbo. So if you have a mavui that its length is equal to its width, it's a square. Now we know that by a mavui you have to have the length longer than the width. So in this case, eino niter belechi mashu. You can't just put a lechi over there, because it's not a regular mavui. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, mavui she'orko karachbo, eino niter b'kora tefach. Says Rav Chia bar Ashi in the name of Rav, that if you have a mavui that's square, right, its length is equal to its width, so you can't just put a korah that's a tefach deep in there. So we see basically that it's not treated, if you have a mavui that is equally long as it is wide, so you can't use the regular hechshers, you can't use a lechi or a korah. Amr Abzer kamchabnan shmaita desave. So Abzer says, look, how, you have these 2 statements, one from Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, one from Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. They're talking about different things, i.e. a lechi, one's talking about a lechi, one's talking about a korah, but they're exactly in sync. Came the arko kirachbo havale Hatzer. Since the length is equal to the width in this mavui, it's just basically a Hatzer. V'Hatzer eino nitaris belechi v'korah ela b'fas arba. And a Hatzer is not mutter by a mere lechi or korah. You have to have a pas arba, 4 tefachim. Fine. Amr Bzera ikashli akashli. Reb Zer says, look, if I have this question, Lahave halechi kifas mashu v'nishtre. Why don't we say that this lechi, though, when you make a lechi in this square mavui, that it's just like a regular, right there, that it should work. So the Gemara says, wait, what? Reb Zer got confused. Ishtamitze hada amar Rabbi Asim Rabbi Yochanan pasei chatzer tzrichin shei boyin arba. Reb Zer for some reason somehow forgot about what Rabbi Yochanan said, which is that you have to have a pas arba when it comes to a square mavui, and that is why you can't just use a lechi or korah. Fine. Seder. Amar Rav Nachman. Seder of Nachman. Naktinan. We have the tradition. Ezu mavui shenita b'lechi. What is a mavui that you could just put up a lechi v'korah? Kol she'arko yaser arachbo. That the length, the depth of the mavui has to be greater than its width. Uvatam achzeres psuchim l'socho. And you have houses open into chatzers, which open into this mavui. Ve'ezu chatzer she'enin niteres b'lechi v'korah el b'fas arba. What would be a chatzer that you can't just use a lechi or korah, rather you have to have pas arba, kol sh'merubas. As long, if it's square, then you have to have a pas arba. Merubas in agula lo. Wait, what? What is square after that thing? What, you mean like if it's square, then you have a pas arba, but not if it's round? No, hachikam. This is what Rav Nachman is saying. Orka yasa arachba. If the length of the chatzer is greater than its width, havale mavui. You hear this, friends? If you have a chatzer whose length is greater than its width, it actually becomes treated like a mavui. Umavui v'lechi b'korah sagya. And a mavui, all you need is a lechi or a korah. V'ilo, and if its length is not greater than its width, i.e. it's square, havale chatzer, it's a chatzer. V'chama, how much greater does its length have to be greater than its width? Sabr Shmuel l'meimer adika pishnayim b'rochba. That it has to be twice as long as it is wide. Amalei Rav said to Shmuel, Achi Amar Chavivi, Afilu Mashu. This is what Chavivi said. This is what my uncle, Reb Chia, said. Even if it's just a little bit longer than it is wide, then already it can be considered like a mavui. Do you hear that? That's super interesting, right? So we have Rav Yehuda and Reb Chia bar Ashi saying in the name of Rav that if you have a mavui that has the same length as width, then it's treated like a chatzer. But then we're saying also if you have a chatzer that its depth is greater than its width, then it's treated like a mavui, which is interesting. So really it sounds like it's about, if it's square, then it's treated like a chatzer. If it's longer than it is wide, then it's treated like a mavui. Interesting, even if it's a chatzer. Friends, that was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Ayruvin. Let us go over what we learned. So we talked about a chatzer that is nifratz bimlo l'makom ha'aser, that is completely open to a place that is aser. So if Shais and Rav Nachman say that all you need is 2 of these pasin, Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel say either you can have 1 pas that is 4 tfachim wide or 2 pasin. Then we talked about the purpose of a korah and a lechi. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabba both said that lechi is about it being a wall and korah is about a heker, whereas Rava said that both lechi and korah are about the heker. Then we talked about, at the end, we talked about measurements of a chatzer or a mavui. So a mavui, if you have mavui is if it's longer than it is wide. Right, and if it's square, then it's basically just treated like a chatzer, even if it's a mavui. Now, a chatzer is square or wide, right? We didn't talk about this here, but we've talked about in the past that if it's wider than it is deep, that would also be considered like a hatzer. So then, but if it's longer than it is wide, then we treat it like a mavui. How much longer does it have to be than wide? So Shmuel says 2 times its length. Rav says it could be any amount longer. Friends, that was Daf Yud Beis of Masechta Ayruvin. Have a great, great day. Peace.